This March 27th, 2024 meeting of the Union Township Zoning Commission is now called to order. Please rise and give the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business is our roll call. Mr. Cormick?
Mr. Shannon.
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
And Mr. Outwards is not here.
Okay, so that leaves us with 4, so we can proceed on that. First order of business on tonight's agenda is the election of officers for year 2024. I will call for nominations for chair of the commission.
I nominate Daniel Campbell.
I'll second it.
A regularly made and seconded motion nominating myself to continue as chair of the commission. Any discussion? Mr. McCormick, if you would, please.
Mr. Shannon.
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Now solicit any nominations for the position of vice chair.
I'll nominate Eric Lewis.
Second.
Regularly made and seconded motion. Mr. Lewis continue to serve as vice chair for the ensuing year. Mr. McCormick, if you would, please. Well, first, any discussion?
No.
Okay. Mr. McCormick?
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Next order of business is the review and approval of this commission's October 25th, 2023 minutes, our last meeting. Any discussion regarding the minutes?
I don't have any. I'll move that we approve the minutes from the October 25th, 2023 meeting.
I'll second it.
Regularly made and seconded motion to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Mr. McCormick?
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I don't believe there is, but any old business?
No.
No, old business will proceed to new business. We have one case before us, which is case number 1-24-T. Discussion regarding proposed text amendments to the Union Township zoning resolution, specifically with respect to marijuana-related uses. This impacts Articles 6, Establishment of Districts, Article 10, Nonconformities, and Appendix A regarding new definitions. Ms. McCormick, if you provide a case summary for us, please.
Yes, so I have here on the screen the memo that was forwarded to everyone that summarizes what we're looking at. We're looking at Article 6, Section 662, Item 3, which I'll get into a little more detail, allowing certain state licensed marijuana-related uses as conditional uses only within the business zoning districts. And those would be for dispensaries and test labs, okay? When we get into the industrial districts with 672, Item 2, for the industrial districts, those would be your cultivators, processors. There might be one of them listed. So the dispensaries and test labs are not in the same category as in the business districts as falls into the industrial classification. Sometimes the business district uses carry over. This is not the case for those in our proposal. And then in Article 10, we're looking at reducing the time period for non-conforming uses in sections 1050 and 1070. And in the appendix, we have definitions for marijuana-related uses. Getting into the actual staff report, we're doing these in order. Article 6, when we get to Section 662, Item 3, and that's here on the screen here. So the proposed text here would be to allow state licensed marijuana medical dispensaries, any recreational marijuana dispensaries, which are not currently allowed, but we know are being contemplated and are probably going to be allowed. So we've got a placeholder for those. And any marijuana testing laboratories and other similar uses provided they meet the following conditions. They have to be at least 500 feet from the boundary of a property containing the same or similar use, and of a property containing a school, daycare, church, public library, public playground, or park, and the boundaries of a property containing a drug rehab clinic as defined in our code. And then they also have to be 100 feet from the boundaries containing any residential use or zone. And then they have to be adequately screened and buffered in accordance with section 520. No drive-throughs permitted. Hours of operation not extending beyond 9 p.m. And all exterior lighting would be downward directed, fully shielded, dark sky compliant, and be less than or equal to 1 foot candle at the edge of any adjacent roadway or property line adjoining commercial or industrial use, and then a half-foot candle for anything next to an adjoining residential use. And that's pretty low-level numbers, especially against the residential uses. That's actually probably less than what some of the lights are on your neighbor's house if they're not downward directed and shielded. They would also have to agree to participate in the JEDs, the Joint Economic Development Districts. They would have to agree to a one-time impact fee payment related to compensate the township for public safety, infrastructure improvements, future development costs related to the use, to be established at $50,000 and be distributed to the township's general fund to address capital expenditures. Impact fee payment would be due to the township prior to the issuance of the zoning permit, and existing medical marijuana dispensaries, processors, testing facilities, uses operating prior to the enactment of the regulations that are discontinued for a year or abandoned for a year shall be determined to be voluntarily discontinued and shall not be reestablished except in conformance with these regulations. All of these uses that exist at the time of the effective date of this regulation shall not be further expanded, altered, or otherwise modified whatsoever except in conformance with this section. And all of these uses shall be limited to a total of 2 locations in the township. In the next section, we have a total of 3, and there was some discussion of whether or not we wanted there to be the same number, even though they are different in both the commercial districts and the industrial districts. So right now, we have 2 dispensaries in the township, and if we don't allow any others, that's where the 2 would remain unless there's a discontinuance or abandonment of one of those uses. If you wanted the numbers to match, we could either bump one up to 3 on this, or we would have to, in the industrial districts, knock one down from 3 to 2.
So to be clear, the dispensaries we have today, we have 2, and they're both in business B1 districts?
Yes, one, do you know where they're at?
I don't.
One's on Mount Carmel Tabasco Road. One is on Old 74,
It might
just
be.
west of Summerside, I think, or around at Summerside.
Oh, around the
south,
entrance?
South side,
Oh, okay.
It's right in front of Escape Pools
yes.
on Old 74.
By Harley Davidson?
Yeah,
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That one's B1.
that's a
And-
B1.
That's B1.
yeah, the B1, the other one on Mount Carmel is B1. Actually, it's technically it's PD,
Right.
but it was a business district, and it was one of those business districts that was converted to PD when they did the conversions in the 90s, I think.
It's PD now.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this going to, so do we need to modify the language to include PD along with B1?
So if you look at the language of the PD statute, and I don't want to step on Mr. McCormick's code interpretation here, but if you look at that, it talks about allowable uses in the B1, M1, or residential zone. So because PD is a voluntary designation, it's a planned unit development designation. There might be some debate as to whether, the board, the zoning commission and/or the board of trustees could allow that as part of a planned unit development. I believe that may provide some discretion. However, as you know, conditional uses do not apply to planned unit developments. And so any change, substantive change to the plan, or if it is zone PD, would require a major amendment which I can't imagine that that would not trigger the same level of review, notwithstanding that, you know, any change or modification, you know, this, I believe, establishes this as non-conforming uses. If the zoning commission wanted to, you know, feel better about that, we could add, you know, a point of clarification in that any previously approved use, you know, if you look at the language of that amendment, any previously approved use would be classified as non-conforming. And
Yeah,
there might
I'm
be a
not
way to-
particularly comfortable with including PD. I don't really want to see PD as part of the location where a dispensary can be located. I would like to restrict it to B1. I just wasn't sure what we do about the one that's already there in a PD.
It's a pre-existing
Pre-existing,
non-conforming.
non-conforming.
If we were going to use it the way this is drawn up now.
Yeah, because I
In
just
more
think it's
than
too
one way.
risky with PD being in the language.
So it stays, it's there, any change, we would take the position that any change, it is now not, it has to go back through, which would mean that they would probably need to seek an affirmative rezoning back to the business district for that, and then subsequently file a conditional use application, in my mind, at least. But I was gonna pull up the zoning map and double check that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, the one on Mount Carmel was zoned like a B7 or something years ago, and then they converted all the higher level number B zones to PD. I want to say it was in the 90s. It was in the staff report when I did it in October of '22. But it was a business district previously.
Okay.
But these would be they would all be pre-existing non-conforming uses.
It actually, if I look at the map, so the Ike's
Right.
Catering is there.
Right.
And then I don't know if it's cited on that property or that
The gray.
property. The gray.
I think it's on the,
That's Mount Carmel Auto Body.
yeah, I think it's on the gray.
It's on the gray. I'll pull up the, Mark, do you have the ability to pull up the county auditor's map? for the
I
zoning
think I
commission?
have it up already.
Will you zoom in and find the property
Do
subject
you
to
know what
discussion?
this means? What this J, participation, this J, E, JDE, JEDD is?
Joint Economic Development District.
But I didn't want to distract you from what you're doing, but I'm curious just what it means that they need to participate in that.
So the Joint Economic Development District is there's an income tax that would be established with a municipal corporation that would be,
Oh.
Yes, so we
Subject
would do
to-
taxation.
That's it right there.
it would be, so it is actually zoned, that's it right there, it's
Yep.
zoned PD.
Yep.
So we may want to add a point of clarification in the regulations that address that maybe you add the words "in any district," I think would clarify that, in any district established at the time of at the time of these regulations, or in any district within the zoning resolution of the official zoning map of Union Township, you could add that point of clarification.
Okay.
And I actually would, it's probably a good point of emphasis to make in both chapters.
So it would read, let's go back to that.
And again, the PD amendment process is subject to, its Board of Trustee action and all that too, so. But I would put that point of clarification in there, just personally.
I apologize, but I don't quite understand where that would go. Are we talking
I'm thinking under J.
under J?
Hold on a second, I'll tell you where I think.
K has a number of maximum locations.
So under 662.3J, it would read, all state licensed medical or recreational marijuana dispensaries, marijuana testing laboratories, marijuana cultivators or processors, or other similar uses that exist
Oh,
within any,
I was gonna say, there's other similar uses regardless of their existing zoning designation.
yeah, or you could say within any zoning district of the township, or established within Union Township.
Yeah, that's where I would slide it.
okay, yeah, I agree.
At the
I agree.
time of the effective date of these regulations.
Yeah, I
And then
agree.
you would make the same change to 672
Right,
to
the industrial.
mirror that. There's some weird, when you do red lines, we'll of course clean up the lettering too, on the red
It'd be
lines.
N, I think.
Yeah, that's gonna be, yeah, it'll be all. So let's say that exist
Yeah, it's N, you're right.
within, let me mirror the language here. Any zoning district within Union Township.
Okay, so other than that, what other comments might you have about section 662, item 3 as proposed?
I didn't have any other concerns. Anybody else?
No, at this time. I believe we're still technically in the staff report section.
Yes. So,
So-
well, I could proceed to 672 and,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's where we're headed unless there's further
Yeah, that's what I mean, I
discussion
didn't have
on that
anything
point.
else in the business
Yeah,
district
no.
section.
okay, so for 672, we're in the industrial district section, and there are different uses here. Last go around, in the commercial districts, we had dispensaries and testing labs. In the industrial districts, you're looking at state licensed medical marijuana cultivators, so growers, marijuana processors, or recreational cultivators and processors situated on a minimum lot size of 5 acres. That's another distinction, minimum lot size. And other similar uses provided they meet the following conditions. So they have the same 500-foot setback from similar uses, schools, daycares, churches, public libraries, playgrounds, parks, and drug rehab clinics. And they also have the same 100-foot setback from residential uses or zones as proposed in the business district. Medical, recreational marijuana cultivators and processors shall be situated on a minimum of 5 acres and meet the following requirements. They shall be fenced, walled, or otherwise secured in a manner that prevents unauthorized access and/or public view, because you have more of a security issue, plus the visibility of some of those things might be an attractive nuisance otherwise, or just a nuisance to the neighbors otherwise. Fencing for the perimeter of the growing area of plants must be solid and be at least 6 feet in height and be designed to be harmonious with the surrounding area to the extent feasible. Slatted and chain link fences and barbed wire and razor wire fencing shall not be permitted. Adequate landscaping and screening as required by section 520. No drive-throughs shall be permitted. Hours of operation not to extend beyond 9 p.m. is the same. Exterior lighting would be the exact same text as what we had in the last section. Again, one-time payment for impact fee, $50,000 to the general fund to address public safety, infrastructure improvements, and future development related to the use. Impact fee would be due prior to the issuance of the zoning permit. Owner would agree to participate in a joint economic development district and further consent to cooperate in the establishment and participation thereto. Any existing dispensary, cultivator, processor, testing facility operating prior to the enactment of these regulations that are abandoned or discontinued for a year shall be voluntarily discontinued and shall not be reestablished except in conformance with these regulations. N would be changed to include the reference of all zoning districts, that those that are in existence at the effective date of this ordinance shall not be further expanded, altered, or otherwise modified in any way whatsoever except in conformance with these regulations, this section. And the total number of medical marijuana and/or recreational marijuana cultivators or processors for similar uses shall be limited to a cumulative total of 3 locations within the unincorporated limits of the township. So there again, we have 3 listed here for the industrial uses, the cultivators, processors, and only 2 dispensaries listed in the commercial areas. So if there was some thought about having the numbers match for whatever reason, you'd have to bump one or drop one depending on what you want to do. And that was one of the items that we thought we might have discussion on.
And one other point I wanted to add, I just thought about this. It may be beneficial to add a subsection L in 662 and a subsection P in 672 that states, the uses regulated by this section shall be prohibited within any residential district or the PD Plan Development District.
Yeah, I like that.
A question on the 672, the cultivation, it's a minimum of 5 acres, but if we allow 3, you know, it would behoove somebody that wanted to do that to go after the biggest pieces of agricultural property in our township, which are not huge anymore. But do we have any kind of top-end limitation on how much acreage?
We do not have a max number right now.
Should we?
There might be some merit to that. Specifically, you do have some, if you look at the zoning code within 602, you do have an area limitation on the maximum size of B1 district lots, where it's no less than 1, no greater than 5 acres, I believe. Is that correct, Mark? I think that's, memory serves me right. It's no less than 1, no greater than 5. And so if you're going a minimum of 5, you may want to consider
Yes.
a cap of whatever,
10 or
15 acres, something like that.
Yeah, I could just see, kind of like the solar farm issues where they're finding the biggest pieces of property they can develop. And, you know, where it was initially, the idea was, we're going to have these 50-acre solar farms, now we're getting 500-acre solar farms. You could potentially run into the same problem with cultivator. I don't know that we have that much property.
I think we were discussing this before when we were talking about, I think it came up when we were talking about the zoning resolutions for chickens. And we were talking,
Right.
we were trying to figure out what's the largest available
Right.
place
Yeah.
within the township
You've
that
got
could
like,
realistically do
yeah,
that.
you got the Icolts farm right across the street.
Right.
There's several of those size farms still around, down on Round Bottom, potentially. Now zoning would probably have to be changed on some of those, but again,
We have 2 or 3 of them now, don't you?
yeah.
We also have to take into consideration the locational factors that are in there as far as like the distances away from certain things. So
Right.
that, I mean, we didn't really try mapping out how many areas would qualify, which is kind of an interesting exercise sometimes when you do that.
Right.
And I didn't also
Well, so-
research the maximum size.
Just a point of clarification, in the M1 district, we've done some of that prior analysis when we did the drug rehab clinic. There are in the industrial district, so we were able to determine that there is available land for those uses in the M1 district. that meet that 5-acre requirement and that have that setback and all of that. Thinking more generally from a zoning district perspective, and I think it would be beneficial, Mark, if you could pull up the zoning map and show the board where the M1 districts primarily are located. So Round Bottom Road, there's considerable acreage on Round Bottom Road in the M1 district. There's considerable acreage in the McMahon, Buxton areas. Those are where your two largest concentrations of available land are. Thinking more generally to the larger tracts of agricultural use sort of in the center of the township, you have the Eicholtz Farm. I believe that's zoned predominantly residential with some moderate commercial influence around the perimeter. And then you have a larger tract that's sort of under a binding, residential decree off of Rumpke, and then that's in agricultural use, I believe, right now. And then there's about a 20-something acre parcel in residential use, kind of in the middle of the McMahon Road block. If you can kind of see it's a lighter gray there. You've got L3's the dark gray. There's that 26-acre parcel that's residentially zoned. Round Bottom, you can see sort of the PD influence, and then the M1 district influence. So again, the Smith Farm, that's a considerable piece of property. And then you've got sort of some smaller sites that are in the River Valley Drive and that vicinity there. And then sort of some access challenged parcels that are in athletic field use right now. And then you go into the PD district, which is the railroad terminal.
Right.
Yeah, so you can see there that kind of where your light gray is. And I'm probably the wrong person to look at the map because I don't see colors real well, but that gives you some idea of where the larger industrial tracts are.
So there is the potential that you could have a cultivator turn a couple hundred acres into a marijuana grow, especially down in that Round Bottom area.
Yep.
So that, at that point, the guy that wants to do it on a 5-acre plot pays a $50,000 impact fee. Guy does it on a 200-acre plot, pays a $50,000 impact fee, even though there's a lot more impact on that 200 acre. So you start it out as we have a limitation of 5 to 20 acres. And then it's something we review after the state law comes down as well.
Yeah, and I'm good with that. I would lean towards limiting the number of cultivators at this point to be the same as the number of dispensaries, and we can always increase it, you can't decrease it. I mean, if you have 3, you can't take it back to 2, and I don't know where this is going, this is new to all of us.
None of us have it.
Yeah.
What this is, and I'd be more inclined to limit it at this point and expand it later, rather than regret having expanded it right from the beginning. I don't know what to expect from this.
If you're gonna pick acreage, I would say it's either gotta be maybe 10 or 20 acres.
I would say 20.
So did I catch, I'm just taking notes here, so did I catch a cumulative total of 2 locations on the?
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Mr. Campbell?
Sure.
Mr. Shannon?
Like, I'm Mark.
But I want to hear what Daniel has to say. What's your thought?
No, I mean, I agree with Mr. Lewis in that once the genie's out of the bottle, it's out of the bottle. So if you say 3 now, you're not going to be able to cut it back to 2 if
Right.
you want to. And I agree with Mr. Wing that figuring out a maximum amount of space makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, 20 acres is
20
a lot
acres
of
is a
marijuana.
lot. Yes.
So that would read state licensed medical marijuana cultivators, marijuana processors, or recreational marijuana cultivators, marijuana processors situated on a minimum lot size of 5 acres up to a maximum
Yeah, not to exceed.
lot size of 20 acres.
And then
and
once,
other similar uses.
and then once the state actually publishes what our laws will be, then we can go back and make modifications as necessary.
Yeah, we may very likely, I mean, you hope you don't have to, but it's very likely if they
Right.
go certain directions, we may have to.
I believe I read that the Assembly is considering two different bills at the moment regarding additional regulation beyond beyond the statute that passed when issue 2.
I think it would say maximum lot size not to exceed 20 acres.
That would give a medicinal grower plenty of acreage to, the recreational growers that most likely is going to come from a different part of our state.
And again, these are all subject, you know, I think the genesis of these regulations were, you're walking a fine line of what is authorized by statute, by referendum, whatever, and then providing some guardrails on the process, providing the opportunity for public input through the conditional use approval process, which has a notice requirement in that. And that does allow for validation of those requests really on a granular level, you know, or on a community-wide level. It really depends. So.
Yeah, so when these come in for conditional use review, of course, everything in these sections are applicable, but also the applicable text for the process for conditional uses are applicable as well. So it's kind of going to be in a pretty intense review process.
Yeah, I think, I think we're better off, being as tight as we can be starting out, knowing that we're probably going to have to step back goals a little bit. But as was stated, we can always add more, so.
And some of these industrial areas that we're talking about, they look big on a map, but I mean, in reality, on Round Bottom, a lot of that's floodplain, or is somebody really gonna raise it out of the floodplain, or are they gonna plant the plants right there next to the floodplain, just leave them there? Like, it's
They
kind
may.
of, it's
They
kind
may.
of unlikely.
Now, hold on a second, I thought that all the growing, the cultivating had to be indoors, enclosed.
So, I don't know.
We don't know what the state's
The
going to
state,
say.
it's
Yeah.
going to be a state regulation, and we don't know what it is yet.
Now, the medical, I believe, is all indoors.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, maybe
So-
that's, okay, so medical is indoors, but we don't know.
We don't know what's going to come out of the varying House bills.
The recreation will be a crop that falls under FDA guideline.
Okay.
but in that particular area, I mean, they'd have to do, I mean, you'd have a lot of constraints because of the floodplain, so they either have to raise it if it's a structure, and if you have a crop that's outside, you don't really necessarily, some things thrive in the floodplain, but even then, like, I don't think
Right.
you'd want it right there on the river.
No.
Even with a fence, it would be,
Yeah,
I
so
think,
much
too
of it is going to
attractive.
be determined by how much cultivation we have in the state.
Does the board want to establish a requirement that it's indoors?
I mean, we can put it in there, and
20
then,
acres under roof is a lot of property.
yeah.
Sure
oh, yeah.
is, that'd be a big building.
They wouldn't be able to, well, they could, but then does our accessory building, or accessory structure?
That wouldn't be an accessory
No,
structure.
Right,
I
no,
know. But that would limit the sizes of the
I
buildings.
would certainly think it would have that impact.
But, yeah, so if we put that in now, then we're not trying to add it later, and it's easily removed. So I don't see a reason not to start that way.
To have it under roof?
Under roof, yeah. And then when we see the state law, it may be very specific about that too, so.
But now, if it's under roof, then that requires alternate lighting, or do they still use sunlight somehow?
They can do greenhouse, but most of the time when they do inside, they'll go with either a hydroponic or, so it's totally controlled.
So there's more energy required?
Yes.
Just stop and think about a 20-acre building under roof.
Yeah, I've been in 20-acre buildings, and they are gigantic.
Well, how big do you think the Purina plant is? I mean, that's massive, but I don't think it's 20 acres, do you?
The Purina plant?
The new, out here on 32?
Oh, no, I don't think that's, well, that could be 20 acres.
Yeah, I've
So-
not been close to it.
One other item, so in the industrial uses, you have the 5-acre reference twice, so it's in 672.2.
Right.
And then in 672.2C, where it talks about, it says marijuana processors shall be situated on a minimum of 5 acres up to a maximum lot size of 20 acres. You would want to add that there as well.
Yeah.
Under C, right?
Yeah, under
Yeah,
item C.
I would put it as number, or 4. That's where I was slotting it.
Well, you just got it in there twice, so, and then I was just going to add in that language to be consistent, shall be situated on a minimum 5 acres up to a maximum lot size. How did I write that in the other one? Not to exceed 20 acres. And then to your point about indoor,
I'm not all
subsection
uncomfortable with that.
4,
Yeah.
the indoor,
Yeah, because it's going to dramatically increase energy consumption. And if it can be effectively or economically achieved without that additional electric power requirements, and I don't think they would be implementing solar, I would, and they can make use of the sunlight, the natural sunlight. I know that it sounds like the medical has to be done inside probably for reasons of medical contamination and so forth. But yeah, if non-medical can be cultivated effectively outside and it's still contained with the screening and the walls, I'd be up for reducing the energy footprint and signature required and allowing it to be open air.
would it make sense to add a subsection 4 there that says cultivation and processing activities shall be conducted in accordance with state law?
Well, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
I mean, it's fine to add it. It would be true regardless.
Right.
Well,
But
yeah.
it's nice to
Oh, I
add
see
it.
what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you were to change it to force it to be indoors, well, then you might as well just say, well, it's got to be a minimum of 5, but no greater than 7, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Kinda like the chicken
Because
coop.
that's a cap that fixes itself.
Yeah.
Looking at cultivation in other states, the open, one of the issues they have is there is a higher crime rate around that because theft is so much easier. And we're not, we're gonna not allow barbed wire or razor wire, so what are they gonna do?
Which is part of the reason why the impact fee was included in there, because we were talking about the use of the ability to be able to buy cameras and be able to,
Flock,
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, 70% of vehicle, if you talk to the police chief, 70% of crimes involve a vehicle.
Right.
And, the flock ALPRs are great tools from they're passive law enforcement, but, at the end of the day, they cost money.
Oh, yeah.
Those installations can be upwards of $3,500 to $4,000 per camera per location. And so the impact fee, going on that would pay for, arguably the business life cycle of a use, 10 to 12 years of that per location.
Okay.
So,
Anything else on section 672?
Have we decided on I mean, I'm still open for allowing them to make the choice, indoors or outdoors. It's the cultivator.
Yeah, that's,
I just
Just
wrote in
change-
You're
here,
you're going with the state law.
Yeah.
cultivation
Okay.
and processing activities shall be
Okay.
conducted in compliance with state law.
I've got just one other question. It's not changing text, but this is new to me, the $50,000 requirement. This is nothing, we haven't done this before, is that correct?
This is new territory, and so, with that, there has to be a strong nexus to the use, and there's different case law out there on that. If you look, there's, if you look at a case from, 20 years ago with Dries or whatever, and it has to, so that really that drives it to tying it to the capital improvements that are required for this specific use. And so we can draw that nexus, and we will be very aggressive in that to indicate that these are capital expenditures, these are for law enforcement purposes, not because the uses themselves are a problem, but it's the fact that they may be attractive to result in the need for increased law enforcement presence from a theft or, that kind of element.
Okay.
So that is why, and I pushed, Mark and I both pushed very hard with council, and, that we have it, that we can do this. So the thought is, because of the guidelines and the moratorium and the timeline we're under, particularly with what's coming down the pike with the state, get it in the code, and then we can backstop that nexus to that with that. So this forms that, and then we can provide the analysis for, a flock A LPR is this much a year, installed in this location. It has a life on it. There's you basically lease that equipment or whatever, and, they own it, they maintain it, they upgrade it, and then when they upgrade it, they charge you more to upgrade it. But, it's all part of a network, and the cool thing about Flock that I will indicate is that it integrates with other agencies that have Flock as well. And so if you get a bad actor that, breaks into one of these facilities or whatever, and they catch that ALPR on the way out or in the vicinity of that, it catches that plate read, they're going to know they can follow that
it,
plate,
yeah.
where the software's adaptive in that regard. So.
Okay. I was just curious. Any anticipation of a challenge to it?
I don't think this township's been afraid of being a vanguard with regard to land use regulation, as evidenced by, our successful defending of the adult business regulations and other things. So.
And our setbacks are similar to those with the adult business?
They might, yeah, I think they're very similar. I think, Mark, is it 500 feet or is it 1,000 for the adult business? It might be, these might be less. These are,
I think these are less.
It's Article 12, so.
And I'm comfortable with this being a little bit less. I kind of equate this a bit more to a liquor store.
it's 1,000 in Article 12, it's 500 in this, and then it's 300 for your rehabilitation clinics.
Okay.
So it's really, try to pick somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I'm good.
Again, one thing that I would say is, the great thing about the zoning text is it's a living document. And, it's always easier to change it once it's in place. than it
And I
is
like
to-
our new format.
Yeah.
It's a
The book,
lot
yeah,
easier.
the binder, yep.
Good
yep.
job, Mark.
By the way,
Binder.
I already saw that today, one of the sections, the ABC was in sequence, and then it started over ABC. So if you see something like that, let me know.
Okay,
But it's an easy thing to fix. You
Yes.
can just slide one page out and slide one page in.
yeah, I like it.
I haven't seen anything else yet, but that one page, but I think that when we went to go, sometimes when we were making changes, it'll reset itself, and we just didn't catch that one for some reason.
The other issue for discussion is the non-conforming use. We run into issues with non-conforming uses that languish, and they just languish, and they languish in a state of abandonment, particularly when they're voluntarily discontinued, or abandoned. And so we really need to clean that up and reduce that time.
I saw we
because-
were cutting that back.
Yeah,
Cutting it
and 2
back.
years is just too
I
long.
agree.
So that's
agree.
what's proposed in 1070 and 1050.
Yep.
It's the 2 years to 1 year in both instances for structures and uses.
Yep. And then you see in 1072, 1 year of the loss and 3 years after the loss for reconstruction. And that was an amendment for consistency because, from time to time, you will have, residential homes that get stuck in an insurance adjustment process or whatever.
I've
And-
seen it, yeah.
Yeah,
I've
and
seen
so you got to put a clock, you have to put a clock on that. So,
So that really sums up the changes in Article 10.
Yep.
And then for definitions, the definitions are all new. I think impact fee is the first one.
Right.
Means a monetary fee designed and calculated to offset a proportionate share of public costs of the township related to accommodating new development and/or land uses. And then what's numbered in here now, 76 to 82 are all marijuana related. Medical marijuana means marijuana that is cultivated, processed, dispensed, tested, possessed, or used for medical purposes that is regulated by the Ohio Revised Code. Recreational marijuana is basically for any other purpose other than medical use. Cultivator is an entity that has been issued a certificate of operation by the Ohio Department of Commerce to grow, harvest, package, and/or transport medical marijuana as permitted under the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3796. Or any other entity that grows, harvests, and/or transports recreational marijuana is authorized by any other relevant provision of the Ohio Revised Code. Marijuana processor means the entity has been issued a certificate of operation by the Ohio Department of Commerce to manufacture medical marijuana products, or any other entity that is otherwise authorized to process and/or manufacture recreational marijuana products as permitted by any other relevant provision of the Ohio Revised Code. And marijuana testing laboratory means independent laboratory located in Ohio that has been issued a certificate of operation by the Ohio Department of Commerce to have custody and use of controlled substances for scientific and medical purposes and for the purposes of instruction, research, or analysis. Marijuana medical dispensary means an entity has received a license to sell medical marijuana to qualifying patients and caregivers pursuant to Ohio Revised Code sections 3796.04 and/or 3796.10 or any other rules, administrative laws, codes, or processes promulgated pursuant to the authority provided thereunder. And finally, marijuana recreational dispensary means any other entity that conducts the sale of marijuana or marijuana-based products to any person for any other reason other than medical use as defined in this resolution. We have an extra comma.
I noted that, yep.
And as regulated by any relevant provision of the Ohio Revised Code or any other rules, administrative laws, codes, or processes promulgated pursuant to the authority provided thereunder. I believe that is the last section. Double check here. It is.
Just renumbered, everything else is just renumbered.
I think we got rid of the numbering on the new books.
I was going to bring that up. I believe in a previous text
We
amendment
did.
from this past year, we
Did we?
eliminated numbers from the definition.
We can
section.
eliminate them.
Oh, I agree.
Because they're in alphabetical order anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yep, that was the reason
There they are.
behind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're gone.
We'll clean those up.
And it was one of those ones where sometimes when you go to slide one in, they're not really
Yeah.
numbered like a bulleted list, and so it's kind of a painful thing to go through and number them all. So, any other comments, questions, other than those we've already talked about with Articles 6, 7, 10, and the Appendix A? I know between Mr. Wright's comments and what he wrote down in mine, I think we've got these covered. So right now, in section 662, we're referencing J to include references to whether, regardless of the zoning district that the existing users are located in, we're going to make a reference to that. And we're adding to both 662 and 672, one at the end. Uses regulated in this section shall be prohibited in residential areas, something to that effect. And then section 672, we have the acreage stipulation, minimum 5 acres, no more than 20 acre site. And then a stipulation that all processors and cultivators must be conducted in accordance with state law. That'd be C4 essentially. And then we will only allow 2, maximum of 2 in the industrial areas for the cultivators and processors. And I believe that is it, unless I missed something.
I've got them all written down here.
Does that sound
I'll just
consistent
go
with what you have?
662, just to confirm, and I won't belabor the point too much. 662, add the words, quote, within any zoning district within Union Township, within subsection J, add subsection L to read, the uses regulated by this section shall be prohibited within any residential district or within the PD Plan Development District. That concludes the amendments for section 662. For 672, add to subsection 2 to read on a minimum lot size of 5 acres up to a maximum lot size not to exceed 20 acres. Subsection 2C to read on a minimum of 5 contiguous acres up to a maximum lot size not to exceed 20 acres. Add numeral, Roman numeral number 4, cultivation and processing activities shall be conducted in compliance with state law. Add to subsection N, uses that exist, quote, within any zoning district within Union Township at the time of the effective date, and then change the number permitted in O from 3 to 2, and then add subsection P, the uses regulated by this section shall be prohibited within any residential district or within the PD Plan Development District.
Sounds like we're on the same page.
Sounds right. It sounds the same.
I think
Yep.
procedurally, we have to open
Public hearing.
public comment.
Correct.
Hearing on that.
So now that the staff report's done, we are opening for public comment. No members of the public are yet remaining in the room with us, so now we will close for public comment and discuss amongst ourselves, along with any questions to our development director and our township administrator.
I don't have any questions, and I think we could move this forward back to the trustees with a motion similar to what we've done in the past, referencing the modifications discussed and recorded by Mr. Wright and Mr. McCormick, and then forward a recommendation for approval would be my recommendation.
I'm glad that we had a discussion regarding the impact fee and the nature of that. And I'm glad that staff has worked closely with legal counsel on this, because this is a new and evolving area, and we're not quite sure, and when you review the statute, it's
The good
It's
news is, we have a
complex.
severability clause in the zoning resolution. And, the other part of that too is we'll aggressively defend our regulations. And, court of competent jurisdiction, but we'll do everything we can to tie that together, should these regulations be put in place, and draw a specific nexus to that, so.
So I did have a question. When I was going through this, and we talked briefly earlier, but we don't have any zoning regulations based on liquor stores, which are still our state entities, although they are no longer controlled the way they used to be. And we have several in areas that are residential and within 500 feet or less of schools. Is this something that was never addressed because it was state law, or is this something we should address?
Well, the one difference being, is with liquor permits, is they're really on a precinct by precinct
Right.
basis. And so a precinct can vote to prohibit, liquor sales. And it is truly the most granular thing
Right.
that you can do in, our business here. And so really with the state laws being what they are, provided that, it's a B1 district zone, and provided that, and we do have setback requirements from residential use zones and all of that for standard B1 uses, and it varies by the type of use. If a precinct wanted to outlaw that, the precinct has the ability to organize a ballot initiative. I think that was done successfully in Mount Carmel on precinct B, right? And then that was subsequently amended to allow for a family sit-down restaurant. I think in my prior tenure here, the precinct voted to do that. And then I believe more recently, you'll see a local option from here from time to time. I think Mount Carmel was successfully able to get a local option on Sunday sales, which was,
Right.
you know, because of that or whatever, mixed use, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that with that being a much more well-settled area of
Right.
use and, you know, an accepted use in the community generally, and having that ability to prohibit it on a precinct basis has really not led to the need for,
Okay.
you know, specific regulations. on
Yeah,
it.
I can see the comparison of the two ultimately, though.
Mhm.
And, you know, from a legal status standpoint, is that going to make a difference? You know?
You know, again, my next law class will be the first one I attend, but,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. No, and again, that's just a rhetorical question.
They have guidelines. They have to be so many feet from school.
I think the closest one that we have is in Mount Carmel. It's
Right
Eastgate
across
Wine
from
and
St.
Spirits.
Veronica's, yeah.
Yeah, across from St. Veronica, but they have, you know, again, that's, you know, they don't have an outdoor patio. You have liquor sales that have been there, Hank's Pub and Grub or whatever it is.
But they had a big, they almost didn't allow that because what happened, from the time he applied for the permit, then St. Veronica bought some ground closer, and he didn't follow in them guidelines.
So that, yeah, that was a challenge, and I think he may have been, because it's been there for so long, he was allowed to remain or whatever.
Yes.
You know, the bulk of our establishments, whether they're, you know, patron sales or whether they're carry-out sales, are really outside of areas that, you know, adversely impact that.
And that's something that in futures, just with a given, the township can regulate that. If, for instance, somebody decides they want to apply for a state store and put it, you know, somewhere we don't want it, we still have some legs.
Yeah, we do a zoning review. Mr. McCormick prepares a zoning review on the permissibility of the zoning requirements as to whether they've applied for permits and all that, do they meet the requirements? And then the police department has the opportunity to raise objections as well. So we do have a good process for that and that. And you know, your state sales are going to be much, your state liquor establishments, number one, those are harder to come by, as opposed to your carry-out of your typical
Right.
beer and wine sales,
Yeah.
which are they're ubiquitous, they're in every convenience store,
Right,
pretty much
right.
anywhere. Unless you travel to other states, which like in Indiana, you can't buy, I don't believe you can buy cold beer at a gas station, but you can buy it at a liquor store. And in
Right.
Kentucky, you can buy wine at Kroger, but you have to go, it's
Tennessee's got it.
specific to
Yeah.
state to state, so.
Can't stand up and drink.
It's it's state to state,
I've worked on that
so.
anyway. Yeah.
But you always have the ability to get granular on the use regulation if you wanted to,
Okay.
so.
Any
That's it.
further conversation or discussion on this issue? Okay, then we'll solicit a motion.
Yeah, I can put a motion together. This is 1-24-T, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll use the same footprint we used last time. Case 1-24-T, zoning resolution text amendments. The zoning commission finds that the proposed text amendment to the Union Township zoning resolution is consistent with the intent of the zoning resolution and the comprehensive land use plan 2030. This modification being considered applies to Article 6, Sections 662 and 672, Article 10, Sections 1050 and 1070, and Appendix A of our zoning resolution.
Excuse me, 1070 and 1072, sorry.
1070 and 1072. Modify that. Sections 1050 and 1070 and 1072, and Appendix A of our zoning resolution. This commission recommends the text amendments be adopted with the following recommendation. This commission reviewed the proposed text amendments and discussed and agreed to multiple modifications to the proposed text, which Mr. McCormick and Mr. Wright recorded. Our recommendation is to forward the recorded modifications to the Board of Trustees for consideration. That completes the motion.
I'll second it.
A regularly made and seconded motion to send the zoning resolutions with the proposed changes to the Board of Trustees for their consideration. Any discussion? Ms. McCormick, if you'd call roll.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Wayne.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I don't believe there's any additional new business to come before this commission, so I solicit a motion to adjourn.
Well, we've
Oh,
got
we got
administrative.
administrative.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, I really just put that on there as a continuation
Just to discuss.
of what we talked about previously, just to see.
Yeah, I've got in my homework notes, we were assigned some homework to work on photometric plans, building events, as far as accessory structures not being allowed prior to the principal structure being built. And then also, there was a discussion on paving modifications, requiring paving instead of the entire driveway, maybe the
Right.
first 20, 50 feet or so, and then not requiring it. Those were three topics that
What was the
were
second
introduced
one?
at the end of the
What was
last
the second
meeting.
one you mentioned? I remember the photometric and I remember the paving.
The paving, the photometrics, and the building, the sequence of events in construction of a new site where the principal structure has to be built either prior or at the same time as an accessory structure, whereas an accessory structure could be built prior and allow for storage of materials for the house being built. And that's denied currently in our zoning
This you
code.
will allow for, Article 506, principal building per lot, no principal building or structure, or no more than one. And then there's a provision that, I think in the accessory uses, Mr. McCormick, that it says that provided a principal structure exists or whatever, I think there's that provision in there, if I believe.
Yeah, that the accessory structure cannot be built prior to the principal structure.
Yeah, that's been a long-standing regulation.
And we don't understand why.
We may have looked,
I could provide some background on that. So the issue that you get into is from an enforcement perspective. And once uses are there, whether they're lawful or not, they're inherently difficult to root out. And they're expensive from an administrative standpoint, because if somebody digs their heels in, doesn't adhere, we can get caught up in years-long litigation to get a judgment in our favor.
Well,
and
back up a minute.
fines.
So if a person is building a house and they want to have an external, a separate garage, and they want to build the garage first to store some of the materials that they're building the house with, how does that become a litigation issue that we would have to address down the road?
Because sometimes people don't do what they say they're going to do.
So you're saying they built the accessory structure and they're not going to build the principal
They
structure?
do not build the house. And we actually have instances of that in the township. I won't single anybody out, but I have dealt personally with that in my prior role. So that becomes a challenge for us from an enforcement standpoint, because then you have, again, and the courts here are going to generally favor the property owner and give them a lot of time, and they're very busy. And so zoning issues typically fall, on the order of things to, the fourth Tuesday at, 2:00 PM, if you're lucky, and the docket doesn't get that.
Yeah, I'm concerned that and this was what, we addressed this with the accessory structures. I'm concerned that we're punishing the many in concern for what the very few may do.
Well, I mean, most land use regulations are there because of the few.
The few.
Yes, and that is generally, zoning code and land use regulations are generally reactive with few exceptions. And now, one thing I think we've done tonight is we've been proactive in that regard. You mentioned photometric studies, if I may, and we actually adopted an outdoor lighting chapter that applied to commercial properties in the city of Loveland that we developed in combination with the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance, utilize them. And it's really a model, it's a good compromise. It doesn't regulate residential, but it regulates institutional, quasi-institutional, commercial uses, industrial uses. Talks about, dark sky compliant fixtures, and it has had a measurable impact. And something we drove home over the last 10 years. If you look at new developments, in the township, you know, the poles are shorter, they're LEDs, they're full cutoff fixtures, they're zero impact, they're dark sky compliant fixtures. And so that might be something that Mr. McCormick could research, bring, you know, pull a copy of that.
Yeah, one reason why that came up is because we have it in our code to have photometric plans, but then we don't have anything to say what the thresholds ought to be.
This has very good, it has regulations on outdoor message center signage about auto dimming. You know, it's a requirement that we put on people when they put them in, but this has, you know, definable, there's things in there like nits, lumens. I mean, I learned all about outdoor lighting. It's chapter 554 if anybody's really bored tonight and wants to go read it on the charter and ordinances over there, but
Yeah, I'm all in favor of digging into that and taking a look at it, but I want to get back to the accessory structure first. We just discussed provisions that said if a proposed plan is not completed in time, then we have ways to rectify that and withdraw the permission. So we could also say that if an accessory structure is built prior to the principal, and the principal isn't completed within 2 years, we can require the demolition of the accessory structure.
we can require, but the courts are going to be hesitant to take money out of somebody's pocket, particularly if it's a stick-built accessory structure. You know, I don't know if you if you've built a garage, you know.
Well, it has to be approved by the county plans. I mean, I've just gone through this. The county is extremely strict on what they permit.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of, so anybody that builds a larger accessory building, let's say you build the maximum, let's just say hypothetically. you build-
4,000.
Yeah, 4,000 square foot structure. I mean, you've got probably 6 figures tied up in that building.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And so you have 6 figures tied up in that building, and we cite you because you didn't build your house like you said you were going to. And we take that to the court's gonna look at us and say, we're not gonna make this person tear this down.
You're right, that will happen.
It will happen. Because the court doesn't want to put, so that would bankrupt me, I mean, it would bankrupt anybody. If you have that much money in a building you can't use, and you just have to tear it down and use it for scrap or burn it, or whatever, I mean, that could be challenging. And so sometimes you have to protect people from themselves in that.
Well, it could be deconstructed. I mean, yeah, it depends on the structure. If it's a post and beam, it can be deconstructed.
Then you have to find
The other,
user. Then you
a
have to
traditional one
find
may
it.
not be so easy to do.
Yeah, you have to find another user in another place to build that exact structure. And, I mean, then that could be challenging as well.
So what would their advantage be they've got a plan, they've submitted a plan, they're gonna build a house, and they're gonna have an accessory structure, and they're gonna build the accessory structure and not build the house. What are they gonna do with the accessory structure? How does that?
Live in it.
They'll live in it.
That does happen.
That, back in the 80s, we had, it's a little different, but we had.
But they don't get a permit for occupancy.
Well,
They still live in it.
but again, you know, Mr. Berkey is very vigilant, and he tries, but again, we can't get entry into a structure if they don't want us to, and we can't prove it, and, you know, I don't know that we're gonna get an administrative search warrant in that regard, and then the documentation is very onerous on us to be able to do that, and they will convert them to living units. And then they don't meet building code, they don't meet, you know, the building code is different for, you know, accessory building versus a structure for occupancy in that, you know. They may or may not have running water, they, you know, if it's heated and you're not getting rained on or snowed on, it beats the heck out of the alternative. And a lot of times what happens is you get a project, you could have a financial condition that adversely impacts your life, you could have a job loss, you could have whatever, you've made that investment. You know, a lot of times because that accessory use is delivered quicker than what a traditional single-family home's gonna be. I mean, if you buy a builder, you know, you're not gonna get a home in less than 6 months. You know, if you build your own home, you're looking at probably, if you're like me, it's gonna take you 9 months to a year, and you're probably gonna fire 2 contractors before you get it right. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's anything could happen between when you file those plans and when you get to the end. You could lose your construction financing, you could lose your job.
Yeah, but what you're
all
telling
those
me
things.
is that the rules and regulations we're setting forth are meaningless because somebody could you know, they go ahead and get a permit for a house and a 1,000 or 2,000 square foot accessory structure, and they know they have to do the principal structure, but they flaunt it. I'm gonna go ahead and build the accessory structure, I'm gonna make it 4,000 square feet.
but we have-
But we challenge them, and you're saying it goes to court, and they say, no, it's already built, you
But
can't
under
do
our
anything
current
about it.
regulatory nexus, we have the ability to issue a stop work order. Because Scott drives probably every road in the township, I would say, if not weekly, more than that. But, he's gonna notice that, and he's gonna say, okay, I saw a structure going up on 1, 2, 3, 4th Street or whatever, and he's gonna come back and look at the permits, and he's gonna see that, well, where's the house? We need to issue a stop work order, because they built the barn and they didn't build the house. Or they've started the foundation on the barn, but they haven't turned a spade of dirt on the house. There's no plumbing drop, there's no foundations excavated, there's
There's
none
a lot
of
of properties where he wouldn't be able to see that's happening.
that. It doesn't say, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But, I certainly don't think it's something from a policy standpoint, and again, I'll defer to Mr. McCormick on that, but I don't think that's something we should encourage.
Can they be built simultaneously according to our code?
I believe that what you would do is you would issue a permit for the house and then issue a subsequent permit for the accessory building. And I believe that's the way our regulations read. And what we would do, and it's just like we do with accessory buildings that exceed, if somebody wants to replace one that exceeds the maximum, you have to show us that the old one's gone before you build the new one. And, when you file a zoning permit, you are testifying and certifying to the truthfulness and accuracy of your application. And that's all used against you if you lie to us. So, again, anything we can do to give us standing, in the courts, because the courts are generally deferential to the property owners. Land use regulations are a necessary evil.
And,
That's-
I guess for situations where someone might have maybe a reason to apply for a variance, they have the option to try to apply for a variance. So it's not impossible to do it. I think we would try to, as staff, advise people what we think realistically their chances are gonna be, because we don't like to see anybody waste time and money, including our time or the board's time, and the people who apply, their time and money. But, there still is a opportunity for them to try to get a variance for something like that up front. Of all the things that we're talking about, to me, that one is an easier thing to say, well, a variance could cover that because it doesn't happen very often. And I have seen what Mr. Wright's talking about, where people have converted garages and had financial situations happen. And right before I left my last job, we had a couple in one community I was working with where they were living in the garage or pole barn, and the only reason we found out about it is because the realtor listed it, and the neighbors were all asserting that they were living there, but we couldn't really prove it because it's hard to prove. Well, when they listed it, they showed the bathroom, they showed the bedroom. We got it all removed, and then they went to go do some other function, and before they sold the property, another realtor listed it, and it showed the same improvements were still there. So people that are really trying to skirt the rules and the laws are probably going to try to do it no matter what. And unfortunately, we do write most of the rules, not just our zoning rules, because of the actions of a few. And to protect people from hurting themselves. And in this case, the people I'm thinking about, like, not only did they kind of hurt themselves, but they were trying to sell to other people who didn't know what they were buying was going to be a problem. And this happened like a couple different times, and probably whoever bought the property eventually inherited a problem they didn't know they had until later. These other things that we were talking about, as far as like the lighting.
Yeah, the paving, that came from a trustee meeting where they were reviewing a case that we had forwarded with recommended for approval, but one of the stipulations was it was going to be right there on Old 74. It's going to be a storage facility.
Yeah.
And they
Right.
wanted to pave the first 50 feet, but yet leave the rest of it a packed gravel back in the storage areas. And I didn't see an issue with that, but then our code says, no, you can't do that. And so the trustees asked us to look into that, to modifying that, or I don't remember exactly how it came down, but that's what initiated the discussion on,
Yeah.
should we be allowing gravel beyond, let's say, 30, 50 feet of the
Distance
driveway?
off, right. I think, so, as you may know, we've not had another planner in the office since around September. We've been rather busy even when we've been slow. And so I still have a list of things that we've talked about that we might want to get back to. So, and I know from talking to Mr. Wright, he has a couple of things that he's mentioned to me for us to work on. One of them was the lighting. One of them had to do with signage, which our sign code is, a little out of date and may need some
Oh,
work
I thought we had
also.
a pretty good sign code.
Well, it changes monthly with the various interpretations that come out from the Supreme Court.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, it's all, time, manner, place, content neutral.
And we have a height issue that's in there that we want to try to eliminate, that that the overlays have essentially like these other height requirements, and we have a max height requirement that seems like it's a lot more than what it really is.
We should clean it up for consistency.
Yeah, so we have things that we want to send your way. I think it'd be more ideal for us to have like a priority list to get them to you, and then maybe see, what the trustees have in mind as a priority as well, so that everybody's kind of working on things that we're all in agreement on needs to be addressed.
And then you have cases like tonight, the instant case, which automatically jumps to the top because of, recent
Sure.
legislative
I
or
understand
ballot
that.
initiatives.
Right.
And in this case too, this has been a moratorium for the better part of, gosh, I don't know, about a year and a half now.
2 years, a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's well past time for this one to be addressed. Not saying some of the other ones don't need attention, but this one's kind of a bigger issue.
No, I agree. This needed to be addressed. I really think you guys did a great job on it.
So on your paving requirements, you do allow gravel in certain instances. In industrial areas, 200 feet from the residential district, you do allow that.
Yeah, the problem was with that storage facility, they wanted the first, what was it, 30? They wanted to pave the entrance and
entrance
back
area.
back 30 feet or 40 feet, but it was a limited sized property. And they wanted gravel between the buildings
I think they ultimately ended up requiring them to
Pave it.
to pave the whole thing, and it shot it down. And
Yeah,
they
so
said they're
what-
not building it, right?
No,
So it
came through
eventually-
another time and it went through.
Oh, it
It
did.
eventually got approved, and what killed that particular project was they, as you may remember, they had the whole site covered in buildings and pavement or gravel, right?
Right, so
There
there
was
was
no
no
stormwater.
impermeable surface.
There was no
Everything's
stormwater
impermeable.
structure, so they were gonna have to do underground detention, and when they found out what the cost was gonna be on top of everything else, it just
Right.
killed it.
So it's a dead piece of property.
So how did it end up? Are they paving or not paving?
The
It's-
project's probably not gonna go forward.
It's not gonna move
not
forward.
tenable.
So they got approved, but when they went to go talk about their stormwater component, which I had told them from the very beginning might be an issue, they found out that was gonna kill the project.
So a little bit of background on that particular property, just so you know, there's a lack of sewer availability in a very small stretch of Old 74 in that particular area because of the way that the county infrastructure is configured or whatever. And again, that's sort of a holdover of, the infrastructure hasn't really kept pace with kind of what's happening in the community. And there's a dead spot, I guess, for lack of a better word. There's water there, but there's no sewer.
Right.
And so that has really driven sort of, I believe, what, you can't put a use in there that would be a higher or better use because you can't, if it's retail, you gotta have water. If it's, you gotta have sewer. If it's, restaurant, service oriented, all of those things require that sanitary sewer infrastructure. And so, unfortunately, in that area, that particular
Well,
area.
there's businesses on both sides of it.
Correct, but they all tie in, and we have a facility over there that ties in as well, and it utilizes a private grinder system to outlet to the sewer, which I believe is over on Elick. Is that correct? Yeah, it's on Elick there, and then it's also on, down by Schoolhouse. So you've got a little, I don't know, it's probably 500 feet of road. There's just a gap in the infrastructure there.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So
Okay.
we'll look at that storage container for the next several years.
The storage container?
The yellow one right there on the corner.
The one that's left, I don't know, they cleaned everything off the site except for that
Yeah,
when I went through there.
yeah, I went by the other day, it's still there.
I suppose if it's, I don't know how long it's been there, but if it's not been very long, we could probably cite them and have them remove it.
It's been there a long time.
Yeah, I
Maybe
know
not the
it's,
exact location, but
that's what I was gonna say.
It's
I
been
know
on
it's
the
been
property
there
a
and
long
it's
time.
moved.
We can look at it.
It does look better than it did
Oh,
when
yeah.
we started going out there, I will say that.
You know, it's a small investment, but it's probably not cheap to do it.
Right.
Because of how, you know, everything's configured down there. And then in sanitary sewer, you gotta have depth. You gotta have the depth to get to it. And without knowing what the inverts are on the manholes and all that in that area, I don't know if it can be. I don't know. So,
Well, the paving discussion also moved into residential, whereas if you've got a 1,000-foot driveway, you've got to pave the whole thing. What's the reason? What drives that? Why?
that goes back, I want to say, back to the 90s. And there was just, I believe at the time, the board, I don't want to put words in the board's mouth, but it was a aesthetics and a dust and a maintenance issue and all of that, and wanting to improve the appearance of the community as it continued to grow and build out in that. And I believe that was the genesis of that. I mean, anytime you see that, that's really about, it's about an appearance, the aesthetics. You're transitioning from a rural community to a more urban
Yeah,
community.
but we're talking about, though, the portion of the driveway that's typically beyond what other people are seeing. I mean, my driveway is 220 feet, and if for the first 20 years we lived here, it was gravel, and it wasn't dusty. It was not convenient for the kids to ride their little bicycles on, so we paved it, and I would never go back to gravel. I don't want a gravel driveway, but people that have, I've got a neighbor, he's got a 1,000-foot driveway, and it's all gravel, and it's been gravel since the house was there when we moved 36 years ago.
So you
I'm
don't get the
guessing it's-
complaints on the large lot developments. Where you get the complaints are in the subdivisions, where you have asphalt or concrete.
Right, but that's what we were talking about. The first 50 feet has to be paved, and for a subdivision, 50 feet probably covers the most,
Some of the houses in the polo fields are set back further than that.
further than that.
and you get some on these odd lots now that they're building on these smaller, where they'll wrap and drive around.
Panhandle lots.
Yeah,
So
and
I
if
think-
somebody wants to do that, I don't know why we're restricting that.
I think where we were talking about it being more of an issue is like probably on property that's zoned as state residential, that the driveway is gonna be a lot longer than like 100 feet, you know, and it is gonna be probably not, it's not gonna be in a subdivision. And so some scenarios like that, and I know from talking with our inspector that, you know, there are people who are building homes, they might be on long panhandles, or they may be just on irregular property, and they may be building way back. And we've had some discussions about like, well, how important is it really to have pavement go, you know, several hundred feet or 1,000 feet back
Exactly.
in those instances, really. So it's, I mean, when we were talking about paving at least 50 feet, like that was a minimum, because you don't want to have the gravel coming out onto the road, doing damage to the
Right.
road, the dust and the damage to the road and so forth. But as far as like the pavement requirement, you know, we have had houses built on long panhandles or on bigger pieces of property where it's like nobody even notices whether it's gravel or pavement when you get so far off the road, right? Like a couple hundred feet, like what do you even, the neighbor might notice if they're not maintaining it and the dust is blowing over there, but I mean, as far as everybody else, they probably don't notice. So, So we do have an exception, as Mr. Wright mentioned, for
I thought it was
gravel and industrial areas that are so far away from residential. And that, so we were talking about whether or not we wanted to have some sort of other allowance in those kind of situations.
Correct.
We made exception a good while ago after Holman's.
Holman's is a big exception.
Yeah, it really gets into, because of the acreage there
Yeah.
and the, just the total amount of impervious surface. I mean, and again, that property's in PD, so, you know, certainly on a plan development, zoning commission has the ability to recommend, and the trustees have ultimate discretion to permit that. You know, and I will say about Holman, all their daily use areas are paved.
It's their storage area.
It's, yeah, and it's all about that traffic and the dust and all that. And then you look across the street, you know, where that entire lot is daily use because they're always moving vehicles, there's always customers in and out. Whereas the bulk of Holman's lot is, you know, it's just inventory storage. I don't think anybody, unless they're ambitious, walks that, 70 acres looking at which RV they're gonna.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, my concern is that we're making exceptions for certain larger places, larger businesses, and that the exception does not apply to the typical residential property owner. That we're putting restrictions on property owners on things they can do with their property that we're not putting on, or we're allowing exceptions to larger scale operations. And that's some of the stuff we addressed with accessory structures, and I think it's something here as well. I'm not solid on this. I'd be certainly willing to hear what everybody else seems to think on this, but it just seems like we're oftentimes more restrictive to the individual residential property owner than we are to commercial operations, and that concerns me.
No, I think it's something to look into, and then we can have discussion on that and figure out what makes sense. I would agree to looking into that.
Yeah, that's not one that I had walked away from necessarily. I just haven't had time really to do anything with it. Same with the photometric plan and some of the other ones on the list. So I think what I'd like to do is
No, it's not a high priority, I agree.
talk to the trustees about maybe what are high priority things for them, and, between us and Mr. Wright and Mr. Berkey, kind of figure out things. And in an ideal world, we'll have a new staff member maybe sometime by
I hope so.
May or so, and then we can, but right now, like, we have a good team of people that can help identify where we have issues, and then talk to the board members about them.
Has there been any, I know we're looking for someone directly in the planning area. Our township is huge. Have we ever looked into getting Scott some assistance, getting Scott some help in all the,
I don't know that Scott would want anybody to help
is that right? I mean,
him, to be honest.
He's got a huge
I think
plate.
if somebody tried to help Scott, I don't know that would go well.
He has got a huge,
I mean, if anybody were to help Scott, I have done a lot of what he's doing in the past. This is probably over 100 different cases, and probably been to court a couple hundred times between, like the municipal courts and the county courts and so forth. I just haven't done much here. I was in the court for the first time here a couple weeks ago, but it wasn't for an enforcement case necessarily. But if we had to get Scott some help, I mean, I don't know that he would be too bristled about like one of us helping him. I think that if we got somebody else in there, he might not like it so much.
well, it'd be someone that would report to him. I mean, he's got a huge responsibility. It's a large township. Corey, you mentioned you think he drives it once a week. I don't know how that's possible.
He's out every day.
I believe so, but I don't think I could cover the township.
So
driving every day.
the other side of that, and this is the other part of enforcement, is if we gave people, if we spent more time on enforcement, it's ultimately going to lead to more enforcement action, which is eventually going to mean more action being taken legally more times than not. And so then what you realize is like whatever you spend for code enforcement officers or whatever, it raises your legal proportionately if you're doing your jobs.
So the township, has done things to help ease the burden. Obviously, we have signage removal that we contract out. We contract out signage removal and those kind of things. That's, other communities pay somebody to go around and do that, like on staff.
Yeah.
We use third party on that, and that's been very efficient. Depending on your perspective, maybe too efficient. But, with that, but it generally has been positive in that. And, as far as, the one thing about Scott is, he has his inspections, that's his daily routes, and those take him all over the place, right? He gets all his inspections together, and then, he'll go out and do those. And while he's out doing those inspections, that takes him all over the place throughout the township. So I would say he doesn't have to find routes, but every day he's in a different area of the township. He's this, he's that. And again, our enforcement process is primarily complaint driven. I mean, that is one thing I want to reinforce, is that we are primarily complaint driven here. And we have been as long as I have worked here, that, we're not out looking, one of the first things like, why are you picking on me? That's what you hear. I've heard it. It's like,
I'm
we are
sure.
not, we are complaint driven. And we're here because somebody called, complained, filed a complaint.
That's an important point. I agree.
And that's something that that's important. I mean, people should generally be able to kind of do their own thing and not have to worry about, look over their shoulder if they got, some packing crates they're taking apart in their yard for firewood for their kids to roast marshmallows over on Saturday night. I mean, I don't think that's the issue. The cases that we get, by and large, are the worst of the worst. They're clearly enforcement issues. And, the only thing I can reinforce is, if the folks out there, is that if we don't know about it, if we don't know about it, if you don't tell us about it, it's hard for us to just guess. We're not clairvoyant in that. We're not the all-seeing eye. So we really rely on the citizen-driven complaint process to assist us to drive into those issues. Because a lot of times when you get complaints, it's frustration that's boiled over. It's, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? It's like, well, I mean, you have to tell, we're not in your backyard looking at your neighbor doing what, give us a call. And we're happy to go out there. Scott's out there usually same day. And if not, the next day. So I think to reinforce that it's complaint driven, that we're out there, I really want people to know that.
So, you hate me for this. If somebody's building an illegal accessory structure and nobody complains about it, and Scott sees it, he's not gonna do anything because there wasn't a complaint that lodged.
No, he takes the structure stuff very seriously.
Yeah.
But like, the stuff in the backyard, the car that doesn't have, I mean, how many of you know whether your neighbor's car that hasn't moved, it has expired tags or not?
Oh, gosh, we've got them on our street.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, but I mean, without getting up there and looking at the little sticker, we don't know. But generally it's,
Well, they park that part
Yeah.
away from you.
yeah, generally it's my neighbor has had a car in his yard for 6 months that hasn't moved. Can you help me? And it's reached a point where that's boiling over. And, okay, yeah, we'll go out there, yeah, the car, is it apparently operable? Well, it has 4 tires. Sometimes it's not apparently operable. Sometimes it is. Does it have expired tags? Yes, no, it's sort of, you go down the list, and then is it parked on a paved surface? Yes, no. And that is also where the paving requirement comes in, is because if you don't have paving requirements, then you'll have vehicles in people's backyards. They will put them under concrete blocks. They will do all sorts of manners. So we can go all the way down this rabbit hole as far as you want.
Yeah, but gravel you could have a
You could
requirement
amend
that
it.
packed
It
gravel
can't
could
be
be
on the
a paved
lawn.
surface.
It can't be on the lawn.
On the lawn.
It's not a lawn
Yeah,
ornament.
and I
Yeah.
100% agree with that.
Right, or whatever. And, so there's ways around that. I mean, it's a nuanced discussion or whatever. And, I think that, but, we're gonna catch those. And I'll tell you, we get as many complaints, we do get complaints about my neighbor's building a shed in his backyard. is he allowed to do that?
Is that right?
I'm-
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Hey, you know, today, we get this lady apparently that comes in every so often, and she doesn't even live in the township, to your point about getting Scott help. And she came in with a list of 8 properties, and she takes pictures, and she not only gets pictures of the property, but she gets onto the people's property and takes pictures and brought them in here. And of the 8 she brought in here, only 3 were in Union Township and 5 were in Pierce Township, and apparently that's around where she lives.
Really?
But, so we get those people too.
Yeah, we'll
who
get
are-
people that.
Who are mass filers. But the other problem is, like, they'll tell you where it's at, but they won't tell you where it's at. So like in her pictures, she only gave us one address. This happens a lot. They'll say it's on this road, next to so-and-so. Well, I'm not from here, so I gotta look up names, or I need like, we really need an address. That's what we need, or we need a parcel number. Because if you tell us a road, we could drive down there and hit 5 people, but not the one person you're talking about.
Well, and it's not an efficient use of time. So, you know, to go out there and try and hunt for zoning violations in a, you know, a 3 square mile radius or whatever. I mean, so the complaint process really helps us in that regard.
Well, sure, I mean, absolutely. If we were going to have a enforcement that just was looking for violations and citing, Scott would have to have a team of 10 people. And as you go drive around most of the neighborhoods, you see.
But since we're,
Yeah.
since we're complaint driven.
All right, and
again,
since we're complaint driven,
and again, I'll say volume wise, that's been positive. You know, we get the ones we really need to get to, and that it, you know, you're not having people tripping all over themselves. Again, one of the things that I think this township does an incredibly good job with the best people, and we run exceptionally lean, particularly in the administrative, you know, because there's more important things that we do, like, you know, arrest bad people and
Right.
save lives and protect property. And, you know, but that code enforcement's also important because it protects property values. And so I think the complaint-driven process is it strikes a good balance on, you know, where you need to be in that. Some communities are the other way, some communities are more lax. But I think we do a good job of that.
Can we still, does the guy still have the horse in the backyard?
Still there? Still
That's-
there?
That's a lady on
It's a lady, yeah.
Mount,
Yeah, she,
Mount Carmel.
and used to be my ear at every election.
Still there?
Well, gentlemen, I believe as the conversation's petering out that we've probably reached the end of our discussion, unless there is any additional discussion.
I have none.
I have none.
If there isn't, I'll solicit a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
A regularly made and seconded motion that we adjourn this meeting of the zoning commission. Mr. McCormick?
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So we are adjourned at 8:38 PM.
Got to smack that gavel.
Is the township aware that the
Thank you, everyone.